Look, I get it now. Baldur's Gate 3 has officially ensnared me in its jaws. And possibly claws. It's a game like few other that I've ever actually played. And it's also a game that fulfills a niche that I've been kind of subconsciously looking for these past few years. And I want to talk about why, because I'm a little over 10 hours into the game at this point. Probably more than like 12. Okay, never mind. Apparently I'm terrible with time because it's actually over 16 hours. And I love this game to death. I really genuinely do. And the reason I love this game so much is down to a very singular point called player agency. You see, Baldur's Gate 3 is a D&D game, a Dungeons & Dragons game, a game designed around the idea of you going on an adventure and you having agency as to how that adventure progresses. You are not following a linear railroad of a story where you go plot point by plot point based on what the writers want you to do. You are thrust into this world and you make the story for yourself. Now, obviously there's scripted scenarios and all that, but how you interact and how you progress through them is almost entirely dependent upon your own choices. I have an entire party of characters that are all in my party because I chose to let them in the party. I could have abandoned them. In the case of Gale, I could have severed off their hand and thrown them back through the portal. I could have told them no. I could have just stabbed the vampire when he tried to suck me blood, actually dry. I could have done all of this, but I chose to have them in my party, and I chose to be, except for Gale, somewhat trusting of them, to give them the benefit of the doubt if that were the case. And it seems like you can't go that far in this game, and again, I'm only in Act 1, in the beginnings of Act 1, right? And every scenario that I come across has had multiple ways for me to interact and interface with the game to change the course of the scenario. Any scenario that involves an animal, I could have probably taken a potion of animal speaking to communicate with the animal. One of the key moments about this is right before stream last night, I found a squirrel near camp. I went up to it, it turned out to be territorial, and it bit my foot. I crit failed a intimidation check, which will eternally haunt me now, and I just can't interact with the squirrel anymore. Had I taken a potion of animal speaking though, I guarantee you I could have engaged in a thoughtful conversation with the squirrel. I don't know what would have happened if I won the role, if I went for a different type of role. Maybe there was a way for me to find a nut and give it to him as a peace offering, because the game allows for this level of player agency. And this non-linearity is genuinely appealing because it's driving up my desire to replay the game. I already have a second character, a Dark Urge Paladin, which produces a whole new series of choices that I can engage and interface with, because the Dark Urge essentially has this like darkened, macabre voice in the back of their mind saying, do it, freaking do it. Kill, maim, destroy, rip, tear, be Doom Guy. And you're trying to balance that with your duties and rights as a paladin, and if you go against them, then at any moment, some random dude called an Oathbreaker will appear in your dreams and go, what up, hey, you messed up, I'll be seeing you tonight though. Like, that's an entire aspect and dynamic in the game that can carry almost every choice you make in the entire game from character creator. My main character is just a human fighter. That entire second playthrough, remember how I told you could rip off Gale's arm, the wizard guy, through the portal? Yeah, you saw it off because you listened to the voice inside your head, who just says, a free hand, let's carve it up! And I think the idea of having all of this replayability, even if you don't replay the game, it adds to your sense of immersion, and that your choices on a moment-to-moment basis are always important. Always have weight and mean something. They aren't superficial. They aren't just there to give you a vague illusion of player choice, as if your input or thought processes matter. In this game, they genuinely do. And if you can be creative with how you interface with the game and choose to interact with each scenario, then chances are you can find a unique way to interact with this individual moment and get a different bit of an outcome. And it seems like no matter where you go, an adventure awaits. Recently on stream yesterday, I happened upon a blighted village, a ruined location where people once lived and thrived, but has gone down to the wayside, filled with nothing more than ruined, decaying houses with an invading goblin little camp there. You walk in and you're immediately accosted by the goblins who say, "We are going to kill you, whether you like it or not, and there's nothing you can do." And you can choose to fight them in a giant battle spanning the entire village. You can choose to persuade with them and stuff like that. I chose to scare the daylights out of them, and I rolled a mean intimidation check, and they were like, he seems like more bother than it's worth. Let's just let him roam, but you be careful now." And because I did that, there was an event later on in that same village at a windmill where the goblins were torturing a gnome because it's funny. They played World of Warcraft. They got it in the memes back in those early days, where they attached the gnome to the freaking windmill, and he just kept spinning round and around and around. Again, in that moment, you could have chose to fight them. You could have chose to be an asshole and just say, "Yeah, it's kind of funny. Do you mind if I just stay and watch and laugh alongside you?" You can do these things. Your party may react differently to what choices you go with, but the ultimate decider in the end is yourself. And in that individual moment, I had unique dialogue because my class was a fighter that managed to convince them to leave. Both of those scenarios could have gone way differently had it chose to do something else, but the game doesn't really punish you for having player agency, for choosing to go one path compared to the other. But there's consequences, so it's not just a matter of the game punishing you. This is the story you want to see, you want to unravel. Characters may react differently to you, you may have different loot available to you, but you would only know if you go back in a load to view it for yourself. And remember that gnome? Yeah, when you scare off the goblins or kill them, there's an option to turn up the pace of the windmill to send him flying to his death. That's an option. I misclicked and got that one. I had to revert the save just for that. It's freaking comedy. The game doesn't feel like it ever limits you in terms of what you can do. If you want to mess up, quote unquote, you can, because the story will augment itself and move from there. For instance, earlier on in the game, when I first got my party together, I happened upon a ruined chapel. I go in there and meet upon a group of bandits who are bickering with one another as to what is actually going on beneath the temple. The conversation progresses because of my choices to a fashion where they go, "Okay, let's fight." I beat the unholy dog crap out of all of them, and a hole in the floor begins to open up, and I accidentally go down the floor. And by doing so, I fall into an abandoned room deep below the surface. But the door swings wide open, and I'm immediately accosted by another group of people that are down in those ruins. And we begin a giant struggle, a fight that takes me hours because I keep dying because I was injured from the previous fight. But eventually, after a couple of tries, I managed to claw my way out and beat them all. And then I begin to explore these underground ruins. Sarcophaguses line up the walls in various rooms. I explore, I disarm traps, I find new loot. I find secret levers and buttons that allow me to go even further in because I managed to win investigation checks. I keep going in, and eventually I come across a giant room, and upon the floor are scattered skeletons that I can choose to loot. These skeletons contain different pieces of weaponry or armor or whatever. I choose to loot some of them, but not all of them, to conserve inventory space. How many short swords do I realistically need? I delve further into the room, and then all of a sudden, all the skeletons begin to rise, and they use the weapons that were left over to fight me. And after a big battle, I find another room, I enter the room, and there's a singular sarcophagus in this cramped little confined space. I open it up, and there's an entire NPC there where we engage in dialogue, and he returns to my camp to give me the ability to respec or to, later on, purchase mercenary party members. That's an entire pillar of the game that I managed to find on my own with no nudging or provocation by the game. It was an adventure that I set out upon because of my own choice, because of my own desire and wanderlust, and the desire to raid the tombs. I found this guy, and I was rewarded. I had a little mini adventure that I still remember. Baldur's Gate 3 is riddled with moments like this. At any point in that tomb, I could have turned away, decided this isn't worth the hassle, or I could have just not explored and investigated properly and chose to leave. But I didn't. I kept at it, and eventually I found an entire NPC. And it's stuff like this, and moments like this, and little stories that you form of your own accord that give Baldur's Gate 3 the characterization and the appeal that it so rightfully has accrued over these last few months. And mind you, I've only scratched the surface of Act 1 of a 5-act game, and I've already had so many moments like this. So many little moments where, on a replaythrough that I eventually want to do, I can do something completely different. What if I used a potion of animal speaking when I went into the owlbear cave? Could I have talked to the owlbear and engaged in a dialogue with it instead of slaughtering its mother and then the cub as well? Could I have done that? Probably. It's Baldur's Gate. And if you're completely obsessed with getting the best possible outcome in every little micro decision and moment, then this game could feel overwhelming. But if you're just willing to let yourself go on this Dungeons and Dragons-esque adventure, then that's a little moment that I'm going to want to see when I replay the game. That's something I'm going to always keep in the back of my mind. And how does this progress differently? If I was a druid and I come upon that one little section, could I somehow gain some understanding of owlbears? And could that information be beneficial to me later on? Could it? I don't know. And that state of not knowing is kind of the appeal of Baldur's Gate, and the appeal of replayability. Because I think one of the genuine draws of replayability is not just going back to replay these sections, that's a big part of it, don't get me wrong, but it's also the idea that my choices matter, and at least having some comfort in the back of my mind where it's like, yeah, if I want to, this option is available to me to go back and check. And at least having the option, in my opinion, is better than not having the option. The music is stupendous. I love this soundtrack, I really do. I'm a sucker for, like, this Lord of the Rings-esque soundtrack. I don't know if that's the proper way to describe it, but you know what I mean. Like, high fantasy soundtrack. I love stuff like that. And this Tolkien-esque fantasy adventure is something that I've been craving ever since I fell out of love with World of Warcraft. It's always been this kind of perpetual hole in my video game interests ever since I left WoW, because nothing really truly filled the void after that. And now, a game like this, with a style and an aesthetic like this, of this quality, it's hitting me exactly where I wanted it to. My one main issue with this game up to this point was the performance of it. My first stream of it ran pretty damn well. It was consistent, it was decent quality. I didn't have too many performance issues, but after I got into the more open world section of the game, in subsequent streams and little playthroughs, that's when a lot of the stuttering and lagging really started to affect it. And the way I managed to overcome that, at least for a play session I did earlier today to acquire some footage for this video, was I swapped from the DirectX 11 to Vulkan, and I set fog to high to get rid of the black squares that were always on my screen with Vulkan. I did that, and the game has been way more stable, and it's performed way better. And I'm only on old hardware, I'm only on a 1070. But with those adjustments, the game has been running pretty well for me. I don't know, Baldur's Gate 3 is just one of those games where it fulfills so many checkboxes of a game that I've been kind of subconsciously looking for these past few years. A Tolkien-esque fantasy, high fantasy, an adventure, non-linear, give me a lot of player choice. It just fulfills all of these checkboxes, and I thought the dice rolling was going to be a killer for me. I was not anticipating liking all the RNG this much, but it's been genuinely fun, and has produced some tense moments. And once I allowed myself to just get into the headspace of going wherever the dice rolled, it became infinitely more enjoyable and fun. What if I go back and somehow win a roll that I once lost? Nothing feels guaranteed in Baldur's Gate 3, and that is one of the greatest aspects of it. You feel like you're piloting your own journey, but that the journey is being shaped by the events around you, and it's a careful balancing act between these two concepts, but the game has been absolutely nailing it so far for me. And it's just a game where I always feel like playing it. I'll finish a stream of Baldur's Gate 3 and immediately be like, you know what, I can play some more. It's just every time I play this game, I like it more and more. And it hooks me in its jaws, like a vampire, more and more. It's great. It really, truly is. So yeah, I think with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And leave a comment down below with a little moment or a little choice that you managed to make that surprised you with the outcome, or something you just weren't expecting. I would love to hear your stories and your perspectives. And with that, please hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.